evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
Welcome back to another episode of Mahoning Drive-In Radio. Mark here, General Manager at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, and I am joined once again by Austin Trunick, author of 2 volumes of the Canon Film Guide, Volume 1 covering 1980 to 1984, and Volume 2 covering 1985 to 1987. So it's another Canon Corner episode of the podcast, and we're going to talk about the films featured in the upcoming Exhumed Films Action Fest weekend, which is Friday, August 26th, Saturday, August 27th, and not technically part of it, but really part of it, Sunday, August 28th. So Friday, the movies are not Canon related. They're Walter Hill films. You've got The Driver and Hard Times and The Warriors, with a couple of The Warriors cast members coming out. And then Saturday doesn't start off as Canon. We have Commando from 1985, followed by the 2 Canon films we're going to talk about today, Ninja 3, The Domination, and Kickboxer. Ninja 3 from 1984, Kickboxer from 1989. And then on Sunday, August 28th, will be the Exhumed Films Colossal Canon Films trailer show. That is going to be 2 hours. That'll be a feature-length presentation of nothing but all the good parts from a whole lot of Canon films, which, if I'm being honest, for my own taste, might be all the good parts from those Canon films. So we're going to talk about, first of all, Ninja 3, The Domination.
He is the most feared and powerful warrior, a ninja who explodes onto America. His soul transforms her into a lethal assassin. Who are you? Her only hope is Yamada, the master ninja who has been sent to destroy him. An epic struggle of superhuman strength and supernatural forces. Ninja 3, The Domination. Rated R.
So, Austin, there was no movie called Ninja that Canon released. There was no movie called Ninja 2 that Canon released. So where do we get Ninja 3?
Well, Ninja 3 is the third in a loose, unofficial trilogy of ninja movies that Canon made. I guess they made it official when they called this one Ninja 3.
Right.
But it's the third of 8 ninja movies that Canon made in their time. These movies are only related really by 2 things. The presence of Sho Kosugi, the martial artist turned actor, who is really in my opinion, the best screen ninja of all time. Really the only major ninja star we've kind of had during this period. He is in all 3 movies playing entirely different ninjas. Sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he's a bad guy, sometimes he really only comes in at the end, like in Ninja 3 here. But the other thing that links them is the phrase that Canon uses throughout all these movies, the rule that only a ninja can kill a ninja. And yeah, these are the 2 things that appear in all 3 of them.
Now, Sho Kosugi was big at the time for being in these movies. What had he done before that? Because I only know him from those Canon films. And then he did Pray for Death, and was there another one that Arrow released not that long ago? Yeah,
Pray for Death, Rage of Honor.
Right.
And 9 Deaths of a Ninja were the ones he did actually after the Canon releases. He had been in LA for a while. He had come here from Japan, and he had been working really in martial arts. He ran a dojo. He actually, if you look through the old Inside Karate or Inside Kung Fu magazines, there you can find ads for his mail order company. He sold a lot of ninja weapons and things like that.
Remember that.
Through these, you rip out the little tiny order form from the bottom of the page and you'd send it in and they'd send you ninja stars back, or your masks or climbing gear and things like that, smoke bombs, all kinds of fun stuff. But he actually came to Canon. He had some small acting roles here and there, appearances in movies. He's supposedly in The Godfather 2, playing somebody walking by in the background. That's something that's on his website and on IMDb, but I cannot find him. Unless he's looking downwards or his face is covered by something. But I've spent a lot of time watching Godfather 2 specifically looking for Sho Kosugi, and I haven't had much luck.
That's a bizarre notion in my head that Sho Kosugi is in any Godfather movie for any reason. Boy, that's kind of a whole other level of interest the next time I screen that. That's it.
I sometimes I love the Godfather movies, but sometimes I do think, this would be interesting if a ninja came in there, if we had some ninjas show up.
Well, I have a strong personal belief, as do some other people I know, that every movie is better with a monkey. I think every movie is also better with a ninja.
I'll agree with both of those things. But yeah, so Sho's he was really in the martial arts side in the LA martial arts scene. And that's how he came to canon through another martial artist who wanted to enter Hollywood, Mike Stone, a very accomplished karate martial arts champion.
Who allegedly stole Priscilla Presley away from Elvis.
He did. I interviewed him for the book and the second book. And that was one of the stipulations. Don't bring up Elvis before we talked. So
I bet he wasn't the only person who said that either. I bet many people in the can. I bet Richard Norton was like, just don't bring up Elvis.
Yeah. He brought canon the idea of a ninja movie. It was at that time called Dance of Death, I believe. His script very loosely became Enter the Ninja, but that was rewritten many times by Menachem Golan himself. According to Mike Stone, it doesn't really resemble his movie, but he was originally going to star in that before canon decided that they had needed to find somebody with more star power. And Menachem Golan ran across Frank O'Near at a cafe and had him fly out to the Philippines to shoot Enter the Ninja with them. But yeah, so Mike Stone stayed on board, even though he was pushed out of the lead role by Frank O'Neill. He was the advisor. He was a fight choreographer. He plays about half of the ninjas in Enter the Ninja. But in any case, he brought in Sho. Sho was a friend of his, and Sho was somebody who knew a lot about ninja weapons, ninja techniques. Ninjas weren't as well known. They weren't that really cornerstone of pop culture that they became in the 80s and early 90s. At this point, you had to bring in somebody who knew something about these ninjas, these characters, and there weren't many of those people around, and that's where Mike brought in Sho. And again, Sho, he comes in, he plays a great role. He plays a ninja in Enter the Ninja, a bad ninja. And he also doubles for just about every other ninja in the movie because it's very easy for him to slip a mask on. So that's a movie that Sho plays many, many, many parts in. And afterwards, canon liked him. They thought he was a great part of that film. And when they went to make a sequel, when Enter the Ninja was a hit, they approached Sho and put him as the star for Revenge. He gets to play a hero, and he's really the main character in Revenge of the Ninja, which is no link, again, to the first film, except for it has Sho and this idea that only ninjas can kill ninjas. Ninja 3 is where things start to go a little differently. Menachem Golan has the idea that this time our ninja movies are doing well, but he has this kind of, Menachem Golan fever dream that the third one needs to have a female ninja. It's going to star female ninja. It's going to be a hit. And there are really two reasons. Sho was working on a movie, a series called The Master, a TV series, very short-lived.
I remember that. Lee Van Cleef.
Yes, with Lee Van Cleef and one of the Van Pattens. So he was doing that. He was busy when they were shooting Ninja 3, but also Sho was not crazy about the idea of a female ninja. He didn't think that would have been historically accurate or fit. He took his ninjas very seriously. And so he was upset about that. So that's where the idea, in order to appease Sho Kosugi, that we could have a female ninja as the main character in this movie, she had to be possessed. She had to be possessed by another ninja, a male ninja, a dead ninja. And that's really what kicks off Ninja 3, The Domination.
That's amazing. So it wasn't originally part of the script, the whole possession aspect. It was just to appease their star.
Right.
But there had to be a male element to the ninjery.
Yeah. Well, canon worked in a way that was very, very fast. So it wasn't I can't say it wasn't part of their script because there probably was no script at that point. It was probably just a loose section of scribbled out notes. But yes, it was added to appease Sho to make him think that the female ninja would be believable. So yeah, the demon possession comes in there. You get a very exorcisty. This is a movie that combines ninjas, bits of The Exorcist and Poltergeist, and a little dose of Flashdance in there. Our heroine in this film, played by Lucinda Dickey, is a telephone repair person by day. She's climbing up telephone poles and working on a very industrial job. And also by day, she's a part-time aerobics instructor.
Perfect. So
you get some great 80s aerobics dancing, a very Flashdance type of character there. You can definitely.
Was this shot and or released before or after she was in the first Breakin' movie?
This was actually before.
Oh, okay.
This shot in 1983, before either of the Breakin' movies came out. She was a dancer. She actually was on Solid Gold for a while, if you remember.
Oh, how could I forget?
Yeah, she was briefly a Solid Gold dancer. And yeah, she went out for this role in this ninja movie, and they liked her because she could dance, so she could understand the physical parts of martial art. Again, like I'm not a martial artist or a dancer, but if you are going to direct somebody, I guess physically like that, you can direct them in the same sort of way.
Well, that was always the Jackie Chan's thing, was that he was inspired by, Gene Kelly as well as Bruce Lee. And when you watch old Gene Kelly films, some of the stuff he does is like, this is like right out of a Chan movie. It's that
Mhm.
cross pollination between the mastery of movement between the martial arts and dance. So it makes a lot of sense. And I was going to say, Ninja 3 has to have one of the best like one-line descriptions ever. Former solid gold dancer, telephone pole worker by day, aerobics instructor by night, is possessed by a ninja and must fight to the death. I mean, who wouldn't go see that?
Right.
Standards maybe, but other than that, I mean, that's just like, I mean, Canon has some pretty wild films in their catalog, but this one has to be kind of up in the top 10 or 20 at least.
It is. If you're going to make a top 10 list of the craziest canon movies, you would have to include Ninja 3. And actually, you've been ticking them off at the Mahoning over the summer, because The Apple would deserve to be up there. And I would also argue for Penitentiary 3, as that's a very crazy canon movie.
It is turning into a very canon summer at the Mahoning.
Yeah, and you're working through the nuttiest ones, some of the nuttiest ones they did. Yeah, she ended up going from shooting Ninja 3 to doing the break-in movies, which were almost done back to back pretty much. She had found out that Canon was working on a dance movie, and she really championed herself for it. She went after it because she was a dancer. These came out, we got Break-In, Ninja 3 The Domination, and Break-In 2 in theaters, all in 1984. That was the year of Lucinda Dickey.
That sounds like a variety ad or something that Canon would have put out. Canon announces the year of Lucinda Dickey. Whatever happened to her? I mean, she's really, for me and people who are into 80s movies and stuff, she's kind of known for those. But did she have much of an acting career beyond those movies?
Very little. She was in a movie, I believe it's Cheerleader Camp, later on in the 1980s. And afterwards, she had children. And really, that's what she focused on. She's now a real estate mogul, basically, out in Kansas, where she originally was from. She's doing very well in that aspect, in this sort of second career. And it does seem to come up that people, she'll be working in her new capacity, and every once in a while, people will be like, "Wait, are you Special K from the Break-In movies? Are you?"
That's excellent.
Were you once possessed by a demon ninja?
I did, but I'm feeling much better now.
Yeah, so that was really where like she had this massive year with Canon, and then kind of left the industry, kind of grew, I think, disenchanted with it, and had a family, found a new career.
So how did Ninja 3 do in the box office? Because I remember I was a movie-hungry, movie-savvy kid in this period, so I remember seeing the TV ads for it. I don't know that it ever played locally in my town. I mostly remember it as one of those big wide boxes on VHS for the longest time in a video store.
It did fair at the box office. I mean, for a Canon movie, actually pretty good. I think 8 million was the domestic number, plus as Canon pre-sold everything, like they had already made a profit before it actually went to shoot. So that was all on top of it. It did well enough for Canon to keep making ninja movies. After Ninja 3, they had kind of, Golden Globus had fallen out with Sho Kosugi, the star, and he had gone to first to Transworld Entertainment to start making new movies away from Canon, with Nine Deaths a Ninja, Pray for Death, and Rage of Honor. And then Black Eagle as well, where he got to fight a very early Van Damme, a star of another action fest movie coming up. But as far as Canon, I think there were those issues he had with 3, but also I think he was really kind of upset about, after starring in the second Ninja movie, being kind of pushed to this very secondary role that he has in Ninja 3 as kind of the ninja who comes in to save the day at the end.
It's funny, when I was looking at the materials for Ninja 3, when I was writing the write-up for the website and everything, I saw Sho Kosugi's name, and I'm like, I don't even remember him being in that. So it must I haven't seen this since since I bought the Blu-ray a little while ago. So it, yeah, he does not. I could understand that going from star to, you know, hey, this solid gold dancer is up front now, and you're going to just have a small role.
Right. And when he went to with these other films that I mentioned at Transworld, he was able to star. Then they actually, by Black Eagle, he was almost like a James Bond type character in some of these. And I think that's where he kind of wanted his career to go at that point. Canon pivoted though, and that's when their next ninja movie would be American Ninja. And we got a whole franchise out of that with Michael Dudikoff and Steve James and later David Bradley. And those were repeat money makers for Canon. So the American Ninja movies, unlike their first Ninja trilogy, these were movies that were related to each other, film after film. You can watch through them and they would continue and sort of.
How many of those were there? Because I remember those things just one after another, after another, after another. I actually was able to see, I want to say maybe the second installment on 35 millimeter at the Alamo Drafthouse in Yonkers, which actually surprised me that it even had a theatrical release, because I always just remember these as posters in the video store and things like that.
There are 5 of them. If you go by title, American Ninja 1 through 5. The 5th one is often, people will argue whether it wasn't actually made as an American Ninja movie. It starred David Bradley from the other American Ninja films, but it kind of sat on the shelf at Canon for a few years, and very, very late in the run, they finally released it straight to video, but they changed the title to American Ninja 5 in hopes of just renting more copies. But David Bradley actually plays a character in that one who is not his character from the previous entries or related to those characters in any way. So 5 American Ninja movies, but 4 if you actually want to tell the canonical story of Joe Armstrong and the American Ninja saga.
And when was that? What was the years that those films spanned? Like the year of the first installment and the release of the last?
The first one was 85. The last one was released on video in 95. So over 10 years, but it sat on a shelf for a couple years before going straight to video. So yeah, a decade.
A legend of the East. A challenger from the West.
They will fight the ancient way.
A competition for honor.
Must you fight him?
I have to.
Jean-Claude Van Damme. The power of a warrior. The heart of a champion. Kickboxer. Rated R. Now playing at theaters everywhere.
So speaking of martial artistry, the second, or I should say the second Canon film, but the final film on August 27th at Action Fest at the Mahoning is going to be Kickboxer, which when we talked before, you had said Kickboxer maybe represented Canon's like last big theatrical hit, or am I misremembering that?
In a ways. So Canon actually, Kickboxer wasn't produced in-house, but it's very, very, very linked to Bloodsport. They picked up Kickboxer after Bloodsport wound up being a hit for them. A lot of the same people were working on it. Of course, Van Damme. You had Mark Dussault, the producer, was the same for both. You had David Worth, who was the cinematographer on Bloodsport, ended up directing Kickboxer. Let me back up a little bit, if you don't mind, actually. If I can give you the sort of Van Damme's long, kind of fun, kind of complicated history with Canon.
Long day's journey into Canon. I was actually going to ask, this is excellent, but that was what I was going to say, is how much had he done before this? Because I think just about everybody, Bloodsport was the first time we saw this guy who could do what he could do and separate his legs very widely. And it was like, who is this? And it seemed like he just took off like a rocket out of nowhere.
He did. He was the one that really, they launched his career. They made Jean-Claude Van Damme into Jean-Claude Van Damme, the action superstar that he was for the last couple years of the 80s and through much of the 1990s. But they also really, really fumbled the ball when how they handled him. He could have been the star that saved Canon, but they really let him get away. So we're going to go back to the early 80s. Jean-Claude Van Damme is a Belgian martial artist who wants to be a movie star. And he kind of had this drive and he had this feeling. I interviewed him a few years ago and he compared himself to Belmondo. Belmondo is who he was idolizing, who he wanted to be, a combination of Jean-Paul Belmondo and Bruce Lee. That's where Van Damme wanted to go with his career. But He moved to Los Angeles with a friend and fellow martial artist, Michelle Keezy, who actually plays Tong Po in Kickboxer, the bad guy. And he plays a Muay Thai fighter in Bloodsport. The two of them come, they get an apartment together. They're kind of doing odd jobs, waiting tables, driving a limousine is something Van Damme did for a long time in Los Angeles while he was still working on his English and trying to get roles. But Van Damme is a pretty smart guy. I think he's smarter than a lot of people give him credit for, but he looked at canon and he knew the kind of movies they were making. He saw the Chuck Norris movies, he saw all these ninja movies, and he knew that if anyone was going to help him break into the industry, Canon was the company that was going to be most likely to make the kind of film that he could feature his talents in. So basically for years, once a week, he would go into the Canon offices and try to meet with someone. He'd sit in the lobby, try to get a meeting with Golan. If people came and went, he would do his splits, he would do his kicks over their head and really show off, trying to get into role. And it actually led to him, if you watch the very first break-in film, you can see clips of this all over YouTube, but in one of the dance scenes out on the beach, you have break dancers going, and you have Jean-Claude Van Damme, very recognizable, dancing in the background, just really dancing his butt off. And he's one of the most distracting extras that you'll ever see, because he was not Van Damme at that point. He was not known. He was just somebody that he was hanging around the Canon offices, and they were shooting a movie down the street, and they're finally like, okay, whatever, get in this van, we can use you here. So Van Damme hadn't done much. He'd done a movie called Monaco Forever. He shot No Retreat, No Surrender. At this point, he was playing sort of the Ivan Drago-like bad guy.
I was able to see that in a theater recently on film, and that's a movie that delivers in ways you never expect it to.
Oh, it's so fun. It is so much fun. I love No Retreat, No Surrender. And Van Damme it's fun to see him sort of just play this this villain before he was well known. So Van Damme kept doing this for years and years and years, kept coming into the Canon offices. Meanwhile, you have Menachem Golan, who has bumped into Van Damme at several points in their lobby, sort of brushed him off. Finally, I think is kind of sick of this guy sort of just waiting in their lobby, waiting to ambush him and, do fancy kicks and splits and show off. So finally, at one point, Golan says, come on, fine, come up to my office, we'll talk. So the way Van Damme told the story to me in Golan's office, he gets up there, he's taking off his shirt, he's doing a split, right in front of Golan's desk. He's doing all of his fancy kicks and things like that. And Golan the whole time is saying, your English isn't good enough to be a movie star. I don't really see it. You need to take acting lessons, things like that. But Van Damme was persistent. And so finally, I think in Menachem Golan kind of trying to kill two birds with one stone, they had acquired the script for Bloodsport through a producer, Mark Dessal. And it was one that I don't think Golan was too confident in. He didn't think that this sort of martial arts movie, this sort of old-fashioned, almost like Bruce Lee-ish type premise would be great. But he finally gave in. He said, fine. Like, you go to Hong Kong. We'll make this movie. You can star in this movie, and that's it.
Sent him to Hong Kong just to get him out of the office for a few weeks, basically.
That's basically it. Yeah, with Newt Arnold, who had done some Canon stuff. I had a long career at that point directing it, and David Worth, the cinematographer. They went to Hong Kong and they shot Bloodsport. And they come home, they bring Bloodsport back with them. But this Bloodsport was not the classic Bloodsport that I grew up like renting over and over again, watching every time it came on TV, and is I feel like one of the best Canon movies, but just a fantastically fun martial arts film. This version they brought back was unpolished. It was edited differently. It's a version I don't know whether it still exists or not. I'd be very curious to see, but Golden Globus, they screened it in the Canon screening room, hated it. They deemed it unreleasable, and judging by the movies that Canon did release and what they did consider releasable, it must have been either a very bad judgment on their part, or that first cut of Bloodsport must have been a real dog, because they didn't think it was even worth sending the theater. So they shelved it, which is crazy, because this would have been late 86, going into early 87. Van Damme's heartbroken, and he's still going and doing other things, but this was going to be his big breakthrough. And like all the footage is sitting in a closet at Canon. And so finally he starts coming into the office and working with one of the in-house editors at Canon. They had a whole bay of editors working pretty much around the clock to cut together not just their movies, but their trailers and stuff that they were constantly churning out. But working with him after hours to recut the movie. And a lot of what was added were something you'll see in a lot of Van Damme movies, especially in Kickboxer, we'll see. But you get the double, triple impact. You see the same kick land 1, 2, 3 times from slightly different angles, or like somebody gets punched. If somebody gets punched in the crotch in a Van Damme movie, you see that crotch get punched 3, 4 times instantly, like successively. It wasn't something like he didn't pioneer it. That was just something that Van Damme had seen in all of the Hong Kong movies that he grew up loving and watching and looking and sort of idolizing these guys. But he put those in, and with the help of the guys sitting around the Canon offices late at night. Some time goes by, Canon hits some financial troubles. 1987's when you have over the top, Superman 4 and Masters of the Universe all coming out and flopping one after another, and they're being in debt. They're under investigation from the SEC. They get some bailouts from different places, but Canon's in bad shape by the end of 87. Finally, they decide, we'll check out this new version. They like the new version of Bloodsport more, but they don't have much confidence in it. But it's enough. It's releasable. And Canon releases it, and it's a huge hit. Van Damme becomes the star that he assumed he was going to be. Like, Bloodsport does really well, but it's too little too late. He was already in the works. He was already working on Kickboxer. Kickboxer is a movie that Canon had the opportunity to produce themselves and said no to, and then probably ended up paying more for the distribution rights than they would had they just made it. But had Canon released Bloodsport originally, and again, I don't know if that first version of Bloodsport was anywhere near as good as what we got, but had they had that hit in 87, that could have really staved off a lot of their problems. And they also probably could have done the standard Canon movie star deal, extended him the same offer they gave guys like Michael Dudikoff and Chuck Norris and say like, oh, here's a 7-picture contract, and then lock them in. So there are a lot of what ifs here when I look at that, because you could have had like all these Van Damme movies could have been coming out for Canon, keeping Canon afloat and out of that sort of direct to video realm that they fell into at the end of the 80s and the early 90s. But on the other hand, if he had been stuck at Canon, we probably never would have gotten the superstar Van Damme doing Time Cop and Hard Target and all these gigantic studio movies. So it's interesting. I'm wondering what Van Damme and Canon's fates would have been had chips fallen differently. But that leads us to Kickboxer. Kickboxer was the Bloodsport team, kind of feeling better about the Bloodsport prospects than Canon did, decided to continue and go forward and sort of make another Bloodsport style movie. And Kickboxer is another great martial arts sort of tournament fighting film. And they go and they shoot this movie. King's Road ended up producing it for them. But at that point, Canon, they wanted to follow up. They wanted to capitalize on the success of Bloodsport. So they paid a lot for those distribution rights. I think more than they probably would have paid to make the movie outright.
For me, I would always blur the two between Kickboxer and Bloodsport. I don't know if it was because they had similar TV ads, or that the trailers were similar, or that the box covers were similar, but I believe I've seen both, but I can't really separate them in my mind. I just think of a shirtless, sweaty Van Damme in the ring screaming at somebody before he beats them to a pulp. So, but Kickboxer had a theatrical release and was a success. And did they do any more with Van Damme after that?
Well, they did Cyborg with him, which is the movie that kind of came out of their failed and abandoned Masters of the Universe 2 and Spider-Man projects. That's another story for another day, but the short version is that both of those movies fell through, but they had all the sets and costumes already set up at Stino De Laurentiis's old studio spaces down in Carolinas. And they had basically a lot of the equipment and staff there, and they approached Albert Pune, one of those fantastic, very ingenious cult filmmakers. People either love his movies or hate them, but the ones who love them really, really love them.
He's the man who made an unofficial sequel to Streets of Fire. Almost nobody knows about, but when you look up the trailer, you're like, dear God, this is a Streets of Fire sequel. It looks crazy.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I'll need to seek that one out.
I can't tell you what it's called, but it's Michael Pare. Even if they don't say it's a sequel, it is clearly a sequel trying to be another Streets of Fire, but with like a fraction of the budget. It looks like a lot of green screen work. I don't know. But Pune is one of those names that I've heard people say they love his movies for what they are, or they just can't tolerate them.
Yeah, I haven't made it through his entire filmography, but I really kind of admire his ability to really squeeze every ounce out of a small budget. And I guess his ambition. He was a guy who can make a gonzo post-apocalyptic thriller like cyborg action movie on basically with no resources. Like he doesn't dial back his vision based on he never dials back his vision just because he doesn't have the money to actually pull it off. He tries to do it anyway, and it leads to some magical results. And Cyborg is like that. Cyborg as another fun movie for either fans of Pune or of Van Damme. In my opinion, it's not as successful as Kickboxer or Bloodsport.
Cyborg is one that I will say at one point was in the running to be screened at an Exhumed event. So that may be something we have the opportunity to discuss in a bit more depth in the future. Ooh. Should these action weekends do well, or should we have some sort of a themed, who knows what kind of theme? I mean, they could fall into the post-apocalyptic theme. It could fall into a Van Damme theme. It could fall into action. It could fall into a Cannon weekend. So chances are good we'll have an opportunity to talk a bit more about Cyborg in the coming, dare I say, years. We'll see.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, and that it's a movie that's fun to watch if you know a bit of the background behind it, because there's things that you can really hunt for. But back to Kickboxer. Kickboxer was a hit because it was produced by King's Road rather than Cannon. They weren't able to capitalize on the sequels like they probably would have liked. Cannon was very good about pumping out sequels to anything, especially if it was something they could shoot somewhere in Asia for very cheap and with other actors. But Kickboxer actually inspired some fun sequels. As far as any of these action movies that sort of go into these very deep franchises, these direct-to-video franchises, Kickboxer has one of the better video sequel sequences, I think.
And how many sequels were there?
Oh gosh, offhand I don't know, but the second one was actually produced by or directed by our friend Albert Pune, who we were just discussing here.
But of course it was.
And I believe there's 5 originally, and then they 5 originally, and then they rebooted it sometime in the last 5 years, brought back Van Damme for it, and so there have been at least 2 of those in the rebooted series. So I think we're at 7 Kickboxer movies total.
Wow. I remember, I haunted the video store as a kid, and Canon tapes were voluminous in what the local holdings were. And I may have said this in one of our other chats, but there was in my town where I grew up, there was like a mini mart, a place that you could buy cases of beer and soda and light food and snacks. And like everybody in the 80s, they had a little corner of that store where you could rent videotapes. Mm-hmm. People who didn't grow up in the video store era don't know how. I mean, now you can watch a movie anywhere on any device in your pocket, but video stores, multiple in every little town, grocery stores, gas stations, convenience stores, any place that had a corner they could fill with tapes, they had them. And there was this one place, Bernie's Mini Mart, and they had it wasn't exclusively Canon tapes, but let me tell you, it was mostly Canon tapes. And that's where I saw the Chuck Norris and the Charles Bronson and all that stuff. And the number that were mostly shirtless, oiled up men holding a weapon or a fist toward the camera was the greatest number of what any of them carried. So many were like that. Kickboxer 3. It was just insane, the number of these that got pumped out. So it is very nostalgic when we have these talks. And I remember that little Canon logo shining out from the spine or the lower corner of the tape, and those MGM UA releases with the silver across the top and the bottom and on the side. So you're going to be with us this weekend, or part of this weekend.
I am excited to be there. I am so stoked.
Very cool to have you out finally, be able to meet you in person for the first time. And you will be signing and selling copies of the books. It's 2 volumes currently. And I may have asked you before, there is a 3rd volume in the works?
Yes, I am pounding away at that third and final book, which will cover the direct-to-video years. It'll cover the rise of Van Damme and the Van Damme slipping out of their fingers, as well as a lot of the video stuff they did in the early 90s. But my favorite part of the third book, which is the research I'm doing now, is a section on the canceled canon movies, the movies they announced and never made. And those are very fun to research, because I'm just doing my best to put together what would this movie have looked like had a few more like distributors, had a few more countries bought it to show, or like video or cable or something picked it up, and Canon had gone ahead and sent it into production.
That was always a thing. Those would churn up somewhere online now and again. Somebody would have the old trade magazine 1 or 2 page spreads where Canon was announcing this film that was coming that never happened, or a film that wound up coming out in a very different form with a different lead or something like that. And who knows if they actually had some of these stars attached to the movies or not at the time. I don't know, but I very much look forward to getting more information about those, because those were always just these fun little fantasy activities in your head of, what would that canon Spider-Man have been like? And that, all these things like that, another sequel to a movie that wound up never happening. So do you know if, at this point, if you will be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday is my plan.
Oh, excellent. So we'll have you probably set up next to the Exhumed Films table outside and enjoying the fresh, crisp, potentially lethally humid, who knows, outdoor air on August 26th through 28th. And I'm excited too about that Sunday show, the Canon trailer show.
Oh man, yeah, I cannot wait to see what trailers they've found for there.
Harry at Exhumed said it's taken him years to put this many Canon trailers together over, all the collections he's purchased and all the hunting he's done for decades now as Exhumed Films. So 2 solid hours. It may sound crazy, but Exhumed has done 2 of these shows in the past called Trailer Trauma. They have a Blu-ray series of the same name. And the first one was 2-something hours, and it went by in a flash, because it's just like you just keep wanting more. And no matter how many times I go to these trailer shows and how many of these trailer compilation Blu-rays I buy, every time I see a trailer for something I'd never heard of before, and you just start writing the list of, I gotta find that. So he did a second one of those trailer traumas that was over 3 hours. It still went by in a flash. So if anybody thinks that 2 hours of trailers seems like it's going to be a long slog, it's going to be exhilarating and a really, really good time. And the crowd really gets into it, and it'll give you a list, probably the length of your arm, of movies you need to go and find.
Yeah, I cannot wait. I'm going to be sitting in front of the screen, just scribbling down notes and writing down, trying to every movie that pops up on there. I am very excited for that trailer reel.
Well, I can't wait to have you out for that. I want to thank you once again for joining us for this little cozy Canon corner. Honestly, I look forward to more Canon films being programmed, almost just so we can do these now.
I'm having such a blast. I really appreciate you having me back on again and again.
And I hope people go out and buy both of your volumes of Canon Film Guide 1 and 2. I cannot wait to get my copies at the show. So set aside 2 for me, because they just, from what I've seen and what we've talked about, it just seems like one of the most entertaining studios to learn about. And it's an era that I lived through and was somewhat aware of, but I can't wait to sort of fill in I can't wait to spackle the crevasses of my knowledge with that. Almost sounds gruesome and dirty. I can't wait to learn more about Canon films.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Mahoning Drive-In Radio. Until next time, we will see you at the drive-in.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field. And most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.